people can introduce themselves and say what what group they're with. So
I'll start. I'm Shantae Collier-Santos. I am the Marketing and Community Outreach Liaison for the Rochester Schools Modernization Program, specifically for the Business Opportunities Program, but working in conjunction with Mike and the rest of the Joint Schools Construction Board.
Kevin Fitzpatrick. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the YMCA Greater Rochester. So John invited me, also a long-term 19th warder. Grew up in the 19th ward. My mom still lives in the 19th ward, right down the street. So interested in what you're doing, especially at School 16.
okay, great.
I'm John Kern. I'm interested in Southwest Quadrant activities, and I have a proposal to make this evening.
My name is Pam Bowling, and I live in the 19th Ward.
Bill McTassar. I live in the 19th Ward.
Mike Schmidt, the Chief Operating Officer with the school district.
With the
The school district. Right.
You want to introduce yourself?
Eleanor Coleman, Prosper Rochester and Oasis, Rochester City School District.
Okay, I'm John Boutte. I chair the committee and live in the 19th Ward, about a block away from School 16. And Jennifer?
Jen with Rochester Public Library.
Okay. We've got an agenda today, which I should get a copy of. Okay, we'll start off with library news.
Summer reading is pretty much wound down in all the branches, and we're kind of in our little resting space before school starts again. So we'll be gearing up, of course, once classes start and kids are back in school and going great guns again with programming, more beginning and middle of September. But I think it's been a good summer in the libraries. There's been lots of activity, lots of kids involved, doing a lot of reading, and so it's good.
Good. Okay. We've got, I know Eric Rose said he'd be here around 7 o'clock, and that'll probably be the best time to start talking about the rec center, since he's going to be involved with that also.
Lose me by then. I'm going to have to.
Oh, yeah?
I have another parent
Okay.
as well, so another parent advisory committee meeting I need to.
Okay, well,
But Eric and I have talked, so we
you've talked, so you know, and
So I can walk everybody through where we are with the school, the school district component of this, if you'd like me to.
okay.
So that's what items 3 through 7 on the agenda. So I can certainly handle those.
Oh, okay.
And then we can come back and talk about the building project. So the School 10, I don't know if any of you are aware, but we certainly, of these buildings, School 10 and School 16 are currently in the modernization program phase 2. They are scheduled, School 16 is, we'll come back to 16 in a moment. School 10 is actually still in their building. They're not leaving for their swing space location until next summer, but we're well on our way to finally beginning the plans for that project. 16 we'll come back and talk about. 29, 44, and Wilson Commencement are not currently in any modernization queue, although we're doing some maintenance work and some capital work in those particular buildings. So coming back to School 10, we actually have a building advisory committee meeting tomorrow morning at the school. Those are chaired by the building principal. They're attended by myself, as well as the project architect and the program manager and his team. And their team, excuse me. So the plans are there. In a lot of ways, it mirrors the School 16 plan. We're right now, and very much, I would say it's a number 3 pencil. But we're going to do a complete gut renovation of the building. And in terms of language, we're going to basically take it right down to the studs, do a complete abatement of any asbestos-related products that may be in the building, and then come back and do a complete revitalization of that building with new classroom finishes and so on and so forth. School 10, as you probably are aware, is an expeditionary learning school, so we will be having some makerspaces in the building. We're also going to be taking down all the transportables that are in the back of the building, and all those are not occupied by pre-K now, but the pre-K that are in those will be, there'll be pre-K programs within the building. So we'll be doing some renovation work or some relocation of programs inside the building and a small addition on the back. The same configuration that's 16, we're going to try to mirror at 10. 16, what we did is really provide for community access. So the cafeteria, the gymnasium, the library is constituted in the I guess it would be in the right side of the building. So therefore, we can kind of lock off the rest of the building, but still allow the community to get in there, which makes it, I think, appealing to the Y and City Rec and so forth. So we haven't used the term recreation center because that kind of has a bit of a different connotation. We have actually specific rec centers around the city, but certainly the community access is a priority for us, and being able to not have the whole building open every time you want to run some sort of a community event. The same would be true at 10. So if we think about how 10 is situated on Congress Ave, and I'm forgetting the other street on the other side, but it kind of sits in the center of that block. The transporters would be gone, and we would put an addition of a gymnasium on the back of the building with the cafeteria as well. So that would be the community access point. Extend some parking back there, relocate the playground to the back of the building, and kind of set that building up in the same setup that we would have over at 16 school. Both of the sites are pretty much the same size acreage or footprint. So although they're situated a little bit differently, and we do have some more opportunities on the back of 10 that we don't necessarily have at the back of 16. Very nice space. So needless to say, they go to Swing Space in July of 18. They're in Swing Space for a year. The project is scheduled to obviously be a one-year project, and they will return to a newly renovated school in August of 2019. So we're right on schedule with that. The one beauty of 10 and 16 is the state allowed us a double maximum cost allowance. And what that basically allows us to do is do all the work in 1 year as opposed to having to move the students multiple times. So our legislators, especially our state representation, was very important. Our entire delegation was very supportive of that. And the reason why I say that in every location is because they've extended themselves professionally. It's our job to make sure we do these projects on time and on budget, but more importantly, we have a whole nother set of schools in our next phase that we would like to have the same opportunity to be able to do that and move students much less frequently. So we'll have another conversation in regards to that. I'll come back to 16 in a moment. I can't give you much in terms of an instructional update on the other schools, but certainly I think for 44, we've had some conversations around the status of 44. Where these buildings are all consistent is the superintendent has an initiative which we are referring to as the path forward. It'll be a series of ongoing public dialogues that will begin in September of this coming September and continue through September throughout the fall. The goal is to have 30,000 voices weigh in on a whole variety of instructional as well as facility initiatives. The end product of that will be a template or an outline of what our Phase 3 and future phases of renovation will look like. We hope it differentiates from Phase 1 and Phase 2 in that we have even more of an instructional alignment with our master plan than in the past. So there's always been a bit of that conversation, but because I think this moment is an opportunity for the instructional initiatives to really lead the way. So I think that's a key piece, and I think the focus of Phase 3 for two purposes. One, there's a segment of buildings in our inventory, the high schools, that have not been extensively touched, and Wilson Commencement fits into that. We've not done any facility work at Wilson Commencement, but there's also other buildings in that Franklin, Fred Douglass campus, as well as a large segment of Edison. So our high school redesign will be a large portion of that path forward. So I think you'll see some things like that coming back to this group and other community organizations and parent groups to have a role in that. So
when did
you'll hear
you
a lot
say
more
the
about that.
weigh-ins were going to be?
From literally September, October, and November, there'll be a variety of public opportunities, and they're much different than in Phase 1 and Phase 2. We had public hearings. This will be much more of much more community engagement in a whole variety of formats, where that's much more of a stand in front and take questions from the community. This is much more of these type of conversations, the kitchen table conversations, for lack of a better term, So that'll be much more of the focus going forward. And Carlos and his team are kind of leading that initiative. So, and 2944 and other buildings kind of fit into that equation. What's the long-term vision for those particular buildings? And the goal is to give the board 3 options of how they can, and then have them be able to consider those options, and they may blend a series of them or choose one of the 3. So that's the, in a sense, where we're headed. Very exciting time, and a very ambitious calendar, I might add. So I can take some questions before I focus on School 16 on the other buildings, if there's anything specific you needed to know or concerned about.
You talk about School 10 in terms of Makerspace. Could you
Yes, sir.
explain that?
So what it is, a Makerspace, and those, it's not necessarily unique to School 10, but it is unique because School 10 is an expeditionary learning school. So the Makerspaces there are very dynamic, versatile instructional spaces that have a whole variety of resources attached to them, as well as for example, there are a lot of project-based learning. So with that, you need places to store materials, you need enough power, and spaces where students can do all different types of activities, whether it's small woodworking projects to build models or robotics, that type of thing. So the maker spaces are kind of differentiated between whether it's an elementary, middle, or a high school type of a space. We're also doing one at Edison. But those spaces there are really geared around that expeditionary learning. And right now we're trying to build a couple of those spaces that are adjoining to the actual more traditional classrooms. So they'd be 2 third-grade classrooms and a makerspace that would be kind of contiguous to that. So that's the model we're looking at. Currently in the building there are 3 exploratory rooms, so we're kind of repurposing that space and developing the makerspace concept. So we're very excited about the idea. We're really at the forefront of that conversation across the state. So we're really having conversations with our partners at State Ed, especially the facilities department, to figure out how we're going to do some aid work around that and so forth, because no one else in the state is doing this extensive number of makerspaces that we're talking about doing, basically 3 or 4 in every building. So we're doing 12 or 13 buildings to scale. It's a lot of work.
Could you clarify what makerspace, what do you call it?
If you think about a traditional classroom,
Yeah.
Students are kind of in rows or in tables, and,
Right.
and they may break out into small groups.
Right.
This is much more project-based learning. This is much more students
okay.
really engaging in a whole variety of activities. And because they're set up just strategically around the building, all the different grade levels can utilize that. So they may have come to the library in the past and done kind of collaborative or group work. That may be one place. We're going to have multiple spaces like that where students can congregate and work either by grade level or whatever the configuration might be. I kind of refer to it more as dynamic, exploratory spaces. But makerspace is kind of the term of the day.
And that's where the
Expeditionary.
Expeditionary?
yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's all.
That's all part of that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Public libraries are big into maker spaces and have been for years now.
Terrific.
Actually, Fayetteville over near Syracuse, I think, was one of the first
they do.
public libraries. They have a huge,
They renovated that Stickley building there.
yeah,
Yes,
they call it the Fab something, I think.
Right.
But they have incredible they have like industrial machines throughout their maker space
Absolutely.
for people who, I don't even know what they do, cut metal and
Right.
create things, and they have sewing machines, and they have any sort of tool or device that would help you make something.
Very tangible.
Yeah, and they have it, and it's free and open to the public, so that's a very cutting edge. Well, it's not even cutting edge for public libraries anymore. It would be for the city of Rochester because we don't have the funding to do that, but there are many public libraries that are doing that.
2 other points, if I could. I think first, we would try to and have those spaces, those very diversified instructional spaces, also have public access to them as well. We're also building for lack of a better term, a mock makerspace at central office. So we're moving some of the support personnel out of central office on Broad Street, and on the second floor, we're going to actually build a model makerspace classroom in the building. Mm-hmm. We're going to allow students to certainly come down and utilize the space, and so they can give us feedback on and teachers in terms of what they feel are strong points about it and what we need to modify going forward. So we're going to be starting that project probably in about 2 weeks. We're hoping to have it done by Thanksgiving. So it's a pretty ambitious timeline, but it'll be kind of adjacent to the superintendent's suite if you've been to our central offices on the second floor. And then we're looking to kind of create some dynamic, more Google environment type spaces there for people to work in, because that's really what our students are going to be most successful in going forward. At least that's the conventional wisdom.
Great. Yeah, sometime if, when they're having some of the meetings at School 10, I'm sure John Lang and I would,
Love
wouldn't
to have
mind
you.
sitting in and
10:30 tomorrow morning is the next one.
10:30 tomorrow
If
morning.
you're available, but
Okay.
I can also get you on the calendar.
Okay, yeah, that would be good, because just keep track of it on.
You have to bring refreshments, though.
I have to bring refreshments. Okay.
You didn't realize that. That's part of the goal. But did that make the video?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so
So-
16. So 16 school.
The students from School 16
Yes, sir.
are at Freddie
Are at Freddie
Jones.
Jones.
Okay.
That's right. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
I can't keep them all straight either. So that's yeah, so.
Especially that, whatever,
You know the-
200 Genesee Street.
Absolutely,
It
yeah.
keeps changing names.
You know the quarterbacks that have to put the plays on their arms when they have to look? That's what I have under here. So I've got that under here with all the list of schools. That way I can keep them all straight.
Okay, thank
So how are things progressing at
So
16?
16, we're in good shape. We've completed the demolition. We don't encourage anybody to go into the building and visit, but certainly if you walk by, some great progress has been made. The only thing that's kind of left on the outside, the transportables are still there. They're going to be coming down momentarily as well within the next couple of weeks. But the next phase of it is to get the exterior portion of the building solidified so that we can do all the interior work over the course of the winter. So we've got basically a hard construction deadline of around November 15th, because we obviously know here in Rochester, hi Commissioner, how are you? The weather changes, and we need to have the building locked down and tightened up so we can do all the interior work over the course of the winter. The building will be basically working 2 shifts. The team will be over there. We've kind of consulted with the neighbors to make sure there's not any disruptions there in terms of noise and so forth. But we will have to maintain that 2-shift schedule in order to meet our August 15th construction deadline and have the building configured and ready to go for the start of school. SWBR, our architectural firm, and our engineering firm are both on site, have personnel on site for all shifts. So we have, not only are we monitoring the construction work, but also all the safety and so forth. So therefore, sometimes, when you accelerate the pace, you have that. So we're very cognizant of safety of the work teams that are there, and we're also very cognizant of quality. That although we're accelerating the pace, we don't want to make sure we lose any ground there. And then during the punch list phase, have to go back and kind of reconfigure things. So up to now, everything has gone very smooth. We were a little concerned about the demolition part of it. Taking things apart is relatively easy, but it's a building that has had 4 or 5 different renovations, additions, and so forth over the course of the year. So when you start pulling that apart, you end up with a lot of maybe unfound circumstances that can become change orders and cause delays and certainly additional costs. And we just haven't had that. So we've been very fortunate that the additions, although numerous, were also pretty well configured and pretty well thought out. So we've pretty much got the building right where we needed to have it in order to start the construction. So we're really off and running. I've got a meeting tomorrow and then a meeting on Tuesday to kind of get the construction organized. But you'll see a much different pace of play there. Really starting within the next week or 10 days. So we're very excited about that. And I think for our benefit, setting up the community access, the gym, the stage, the library, and the cafeteria with that separate, and hoping to have that partnership with the YMCA and certainly with the city. So Eric Rose and I have met a couple of times on a whole variety of shared initiatives, and we're really excited about this opportunity. So I think we're in a really good place.
Great.
And I think more detailed updates I can provide in September and October as we go through the fall. I think the one part of it is just making the neighborhood aware that when you have 2 shifts and it is a neighborhood environment, that all of us have a goal of having this project completed and having the kids back here for the fall of 18. So if everybody can kind of deal with a little bit of inconvenience. It's been sitting pretty quiet for about 5 years, so we're going to have a little bit of noise over there, but it's obviously for about 10 months, and then we're going to have other noise there. So you're going to have to deal with the other noise. I can't help with that one, but certainly having kids there is what we all want. So I think for 10 months, we're going to have to work with that. So I think as neighbors, if you hear particular issues or concerns, we'll definitely reach out and make sure people are comfortable with where where we're at. We don't want disruption, and we're not going to be doing construction work certainly late at night by any means, but there's going to be obviously much different than what it's been for the last 5 years.
Okay, great.
So any questions on any one of these items?
No, this picture here shows the part of the overall floor plan that will be used for the community center, and the 3 rooms just south of the yellow hallway there, those actually open on to both the internal corridor and the external one, and they're all 3 of them are air conditioned, so that if we needed to do something, you know, and the school is agreeable, we might be able to open the exterior doors to the ones opening to the community center, so that we could use those. That's
Right.
really
Absolutely. That's
a lot of
doable.
flexibility.
Yep.
When we started doing this, the plan was much different, and I'm really thrilled the way the architects, you know, took our suggestion. For a while there, I was pushing to have maybe the gym switched over to the cafeteria space so we could have a community center on the north side of the school. And they went back to ground zero and came back up with this plan to add the gym on the north side so that we can keep the cafeteria and use the gym and the cafeteria as a community center.
I think it's important to note, just and for everybody's benefit, that with the double MCA, we weren't able to reach the entire cost of this project. So we had to add some additional funds to that. We used our smart bond allocation to supplement an additional, I think it was about $4.2 million to this project as well. So we've been very firm. Our double MCA here that we were able to obtain, which is unprecedented, was to have it all on the front end. So $34 million or whatever it is for this particular building on the front end, and where it would be 2 sets of 14. So if we do 14, bring the kids back into a half-finished building, and then you have to go back to swing space again for a year or 2 and then come back again. So we really made the case to our partners at State Ed that it's very inefficient utilization of funds to move students and maintain swing spaces and so on and so forth. So we believe it's the best way going forward.
What happens if there's an emergency CIP issue?
That's different. Any maintenance like that, we certainly can address that. It's those capital projects, doing a roofing project and so forth. The expectation is we do it with that money. But yes, any emergency, that type of thing we'd be able to do. And the key elements, mechanical systems, roofing, that's all covered under warranty. So we're not really at any risk in terms of, the key operating systems in a building. It's just like your house. You want to update your kitchen. You want to update your bathroom every few years. It's just what we like to do. So it's
We
just
get like an 8-year warranty on the roof.
well, more than that. I get a 20-year warranty on the roof. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
And what's the, I don't know if I have the right, million on the front end?
So the MCA is calculated. It's an algorithm calculated by State Ed, and it's based on number of it's building aid units is how they calculate it. I believe that the building aid units at School 16 was about 14.5 million. So we had about 30 million with which to utilize in construction dollars, and then we supplemented it with money from our smart bond, and we were able to access smart bond resources for this project because we had the transportables on campus, on the site, which were utilized for pre-K. So the smart bond allows us to utilize resources for pre-K education and pre-K renovations for pre-K and so forth. So School 10, School 16, and other schools within this queue, within the 8 that we're doing, all had transportable classrooms. So the small additions that we're doing in these buildings were mainly, in a sense, we could have the opportunity to be funded by smart bond. We chose to put our resources here because the other buildings are already going to fit into the double MCA, and we knew this one didn't because of the age of the building mainly.
So somewhere I wrote in here 435 million. Why did I write that?
It's the cost
That's
of
the total
whole
cost.
That's the
The
entire
total
cost.
cost.
That's the entire cost of phase 2.
Got it.
When you finish your presentation, could you talk about these smart bond allocations?
Sure. So the main part of the smart bond is not construction. The main aspect of the smart bond is to do a complete digital transformation for our students and educators here in the city. There's this very small segment. The Smart Bond, I believe it's about $48 million was the entire grant that we had submitted and we're waiting for. We've received a segment of that grant. About $8.5 million of that we are utilizing for capital improvements around pre-K education, which is basically at these buildings that are in the phase 2. The remainder of that is for Wi-Fi access, camera upgrades in the buildings, certainly one-to-one devices for our students, smart technology in classrooms. The traditional smart boards are kind of being upgraded with newer technology, those type of things. So you have classroom improvements, you have all the back end, the wiring, all that type of thing, the Wi-Fi access, our camera improvements, as well as the devices for the students, and then our capital work.
Would this be the same bond as announced by Governor Cuomo at the end of July? It's Buffalo and Rochester Smart Schools,
Yes,
same thing?
same thing, yes.
So
I
that
believe so
money's
anyway, yes.
targeted? That money's already
Yes, it is.
targeted
It was a
to
grant
be
that we had, it was a competitive grant that we had to complete and fill out. So when you say the end of July, it would have been like just this within the last couple of weeks. I don't believe it's tied to that announcement. I have to go back and look at that to be sure. But we've had this in submission now for about 18 months. And we just were recently awarded the first part of that $48 million. So this is the first step. We're just starting to get the invoices and the POs ready to get the technology and the cameras out into the schools. So I have to go back and research it just to be sure. I can come back and give John that answer.
Okay, great. One of the things that last month or a month and a half ago, I had talked a bit with Kevin, and also I got a hold of Eric Rose, and talking about trying to find some way of staffing the community center, because last time we had talked at the building advisory committee there was no way that the city was going to staff that. Last time I went in to talk to Eric, he thought that they'd be able to use the staff that they've got over at the Flint Street Center right now, which is going to close for a year. And if we stay on schedule to open in 2018 at School 16, that would work out well, that he could bring that staff over to School 16. But there's still the question of what will happen after that year when the center at Flint Street reopens. Will the city find the extra staffing to continue staffing two centers, or will we be back looking for staffing? So, and even if we do have we have to figure out just what in this space is going to be the office that the staff is going to use when they're there. It's kind of perhaps very small in the area that's laid out now, but we have what we have. But there's going to be a need to think in terms of programs, somebody doing aerobics or all the things that you have at the Y. That might be something that can be offered at this center to attract people who are within walking distance of that. And I think even if the city staffs the center to keep the doors guarded, basically, so that kids can come in and out without trouble, there's going to be the need to have some sort of programming to get the maximum benefit out of the school. I don't know what sort of arrangements have you got, like with the Flint Street Center or some of the other centers?
Not a lot of collaboration. We try and complement what's already going on in the city. So I think for the Y, it's our opportunity to see what's out there and how we can, as a community partner, see what's the best use of resources that are here. When you look at a gym and a cafeteria and some of those amenities, there are definitely things that, programmatically wise, when you talk about Makerspace and things like that, those are a lot of things that we're talking about with STEM and, how are we engaging young people in programs like that. So for us, for the Y, it's really just exploring what are some of those opportunities. And I wouldn't see us, I'm not sure we can commit to running it, 7 days a week or 5 days a week, certain hours, but I think there's definitely some synergy as to what we can do in there based on the location that we have on Thurston Road. We already have a teen center there, so we do some teen program. We have a EPK and a UPK program, so we do some programs like that. But how can we expand some of the offerings in the community, sort of based on need and what that really is? Because again, we don't have a gym there, we don't have a large community space there. So I think there's some opportunities. And again, if this is if there's other opportunities throughout the city, it might make sense because unfortunately, the days of the big YMCA's, it just doesn't work in the city anymore in those locations to actually build it, to sustain it, to get the memberships. But some of these smaller community centers really are what could drive some of the programming that is there in the YMCA. We have our Metro Center. We put some work into our Maplewood YMCA, but again, we have a child care center in Lewis Street. But again, I don't see us building a big YMCA, but I think there's a lot of these, if this is the way the school district is going in the city, what are those, partnership opportunities in some of these community centers? Because there's one at School 10 also, we'd love to be part of, that talk or planning to see what, where does the Y fit in there?
We certainly replicated the action. Now, I'm going to kind of go back to access versus a center, because center involves a different governance and a different conversation. So I think our responsibility in this is to make sure that we have the buildings configured for multiple access points that people can take advantage of the resources. And I think the only part of that is we've also tried to create, especially for our physical education spaces, our gymnasiums that are not necessarily competition ready, but certainly that we can hold multiple practices. And we currently have 106 winter sports teams and not enough gymnasium space with which to service all those different teams. So having this gym here and a new one at 10 and so on and so forth, they'll be really utilized from 3 to 7. The other thing is many of the schools are expanded day schools, so their school days are going till 4:30 or 5. I know our superintendent really wants that 12-hour. Wants it to have 12 hours. It's going to do an awful lot of great things to kind of invigorate their teaching style, but also the way students learn as well. So I think we've got some incredible opportunities ahead. To have support for those as well. You just can't drop somebody into that and say, okay, good luck. So we need to provide that transition piece as well. But it kind of aligns in the same way that, where are the things that I had? Well, it's very different now. You got so it's I think it's exciting though. So that's just as an aside.
Yeah, one of the things that we've spoken about at the last meeting, and I know I've talked to you about it, is trying to make use of some of the pools that are not open all the time, and it might be something that the Y could get involved with, because it seems a shame to have pools at some of these schools that are closed during the summer.
Right.
And and there are people within walking distance there that could make use of it. Is that something that the Y has gotten involved with anywhere?
There's all sorts of different models, and I would say is that anytime you can have access to water that's already there is always a good thing. So a pool is probably one of the most expensive pieces of property that you're trying to upkeep and everything like that. So whenever you can use it to its full utilization, I think that's great. And with the programs that we run in the city, we have limited pool space in the summertime for our camps and our different programs. We run a camp out at Genesee Valley Park, so we already use.
We can.
From the Y standpoint, I think the next standpoint is, as you talked about school usage of that or whatever. See really what, as far as community use, what are what do they envision the time? I'm sure their programs take precedence. So what is, what do they see as what is that time that is available to actually use as a community center? And what are some of the restrictions when we do use it? So I think that would give us a better idea of what could and couldn't happen in that space.
Yeah, the principal from School 16 wasn't able to make it today. I'm going to have to get back in touch with her and try to get a schedule of what they anticipate the school day is going to look like when they're over here.
Yeah, and the school day probably doesn't concern me as much as what they're, if it's a regulation gym size and they're going to use it for different practices for other teams, then depending if it's basketball, volleyball, whatever, then that could put some limitations onto the times and usage of of the gym.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they've got any, this is elementary, so I'm not sure if they have a lot of team use of the gym afterwards. Normally they wouldn't have access to it after hours, except for, it being run by the city as a community center. So we'll need to look into it a bit more as we learn more about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'll keep
this
you
going.
in touch.
I'll reach out and, see if I can get in touch with the city too, and what, what some of their, ideas or plans might be. And if they're gonna do the same concept at, at 10, then,
Yeah.
it's just probably earlier on in the process, figuring out what they're gonna do and what they want.
Yeah, because we were pleasantly surprised when the architects ended up pulling together something that really was more than we had hoped for. They did have to transfer an extra $5 million from one pocket to the other to do it, but they did it, and so it would have been nice to have the people who were going to be staffing it saying, gee, I need a little more space for this office here, or it should be here, but we have what we have. Okay, well, is there anything else that anybody wanted to bring up? All set? Okay. Well, it's a wrap. Thank you very much for coming.